All right, we're going to take a 180-degree turn here. We have a talk from Philippe Gaspard, a Frenchman who's been involved in the early days of angioplasty, the early days of stenting. I think it's probably going to be the most interesting talk of the week. You know, it's been said that those who don't study history are condemned to repeat it. I think that was Thucydides that said it, but it's been attributed to many people. But whoever said it the first time is completely right, and maybe some of our people in Washington should understand that as well. Philippe, are you ready? Or? Should I tell them about your book project as well, or?
Okay.
So our former President Obama signed a $65 million book contract. I think you'll get $70 million when they hear this lecture. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Jim, thanks for the invitation. Holly, thanks for your support. I am Philippe Gaspard from Lyon, France. 40 years ago, Andreas Gonzig performed his first transluminal dilatation of a coronary artery. I did like to share with you some little things about the origins of this amazing and unpredictable history. Andreas Gonzig benefited from the work of his predecessors. Werner Forssmann performed the first catheterism on himself 100 years ago. Mason's sons showed what it was possible to ossify coronary arteries 60 years ago. For him, to open a door is find other doors which are waiting to be opened. Charles' daughter made possible the emergence of interventional radiology 50 years ago. Born in Dresden, fatherless at 5 years, Andreas Gonzig completed his medical studies at the University of Heidelberg, West Germany. He performed his first arteriographies in Darmstadt, a reference center for angiology. He had inherited his mother's personality, intelligence, and charm. 3 stages can be distinguished in Andreas' life: the improbable birth of coronary angioplasty, its irreversible development, and the third period in Atlanta, the impossibility for Andreas to maintain control over coronary angioplasty. His charisma allowed him to resist once again the skepticism of the medical community. When he was told, "Don't go where?" his response was, "Just stop me." Robert Aiglin proposed to Andreas a position at the University Hospital. Unfortunately, Professor Aiglin died 3 weeks later, and Andreas then joined the angiology department of Alfred Bollinger, who had recognized his work capacity and inventiveness. Andreas hired Maria Schlumpf as his research assistant. Andreas needed her support because he had enough enemies. Maria was totally engaged in his work, his idea, his project, his vision. Andreas then joined the radiology department, where he had access to the radiology room and the opportunity to meet Eberhard Zeitler, who started to teach doctor's technique in Europe. Not having the opportunity to go and see Eberhard Zeitler when he was in Darmstadt in 1969, it was possible for him to observe Eberhard Zeitler using this new technique. It was the beginning of a deep friendship. Convinced he would be able to improve Dotter's method, Andreas asked Eberhard Zeitler to come and dilate the first patient in Zurich. The surgeons were very angry to have to manage potential complications at the punctured site. During 4 years, Grunzig kitchen table was used to produce and test prototype which would lead to coronary artery dilatation. Andreas was assisted by Michaela, his wife, and especially Maria Schlumpf, as well as her husband Walter, who was an engineer. Fogarty's balloon was not strong enough. Portsman's corseted balloon too dangerous. Here you can see the 2 first prototypes using silk and strings and a wax mold to attach rubber to the catheter. The providential assistant came from Heinrich Hopf, who taught him how to handle PVC, allowing the creation of a flexible, small-sized, inelastic balloon. You can see here the first peripheral balloon and the first double lumen balloon with a string at the tip. Wilhelm Rütishauser offered Andreas a resident position in cardiology, permitting him to be formally trained in cardiology and to learn coronary angiography. Wilhelm Rütishauser thought that a procedure working in legs should also be effective in coronary arteries. After testing his single lumen balloon in animals, for the first time he used it to dilate a superficial femoral artery in 1974. Mr. Grunzig always wanted to be the fastest and the best in everything he did. He learned to fly an airplane to prove to himself that he had no fear. Dr. Andreas had an innate sense of what to do when the whole world was crashing in around him. Andreas approached Marco Turina, a surgeon in Zurich, with a request for a suitable coronary experimental model in order to understand where the stenotic material would go and if the heart be able to tolerate any ischemia during balloon inflation. After downsizing his balloon, he experimentally tested it in dogs. His double lumen balloon permitted perfusion of a coronary artery during balloon inflation. The pathologist expressed very serious reservation regarding the histologic lesion observed in the acute phase and at 1 month. The 2 pitfalls of coronary dilatation, initial occlusive dissection and secondary restenosis, were already clearly identified during the first experimental canine coronary angioplasties. Andreas reported his experience with coronary dilatation in dogs at the American Heart in November 1976. If a classic photo represents him with many doctors listening to him, and another one shows him alone with his dilatation catheter, what no one came to see. However, 2 cardiologists were interested, Richard Myler and Martin Kaltenbach. Richard Myler helped open many doors for him and became his best friend. It was Richard Myler who told him what he needed to leave Zurich to achieve his dream. Martin Kaltenbach was fascinated by Andreas and by what he had achieved. Martin Kaltenbach was a master of diagnostic cardiology in Germany and accepted to work with Andreas for the first patient in Frankfurt. It was critical to demonstrate what balloon angioplasty was repeatable by more than one individual. Intraoperative balloon dilatation were performed via retrograde fashion through the arteriotomy just before performing the anastomosis. No debris related to balloon inflation was observed, and significant reduction of the dilated coronary stenosis without thrombosis allowed verification that this balloon was effective and safe. There was strong hostility from both cardiologists and surgeons who thought this idea would never work. It was Hack Senning, head of cardiothoracic surgery at the University Hospital Zurich, who came to his rescue, encouraging and defending Andreas Gonzig's project. He promised him to operate as backup if something happens. A patient open to the idea of being dilated was proposed by Bernard Meyer to Andreas Gonzig. The patient was 30 years old, the same age as Andreas, and felt an immediate trust in his capability. The big day finally arrived. It was not an accident or an unexpected incident, but an event that had been months in the making. It came after intensive work over 7 years. When the artery was occluded by the balloon, a drop in distal pressure occurred, and much to everyone's surprise, it did not induce myocardial ischemia. Andreas spontaneously decided it was not necessary to start the roller pump to perfuse myocardium during the inflation of the balloon. Therefore, Andreas made angioplasty a simple therapeutic procedure. Let's go back to Zurich in 1977. We can see the complex dilatation catheter system at the beginning of PTCA and the heavy Schneider system to inflate the balloon. To the surprise of everyone, Andreas Gonzig presented the result of his first 4 patients at the American Heart in Miami in November 1977. In the middle of his talk, he received thunderous applause from the audience and a standing ovation. Mason sons look on in wonder. Andreas has created a new disease, balloon fever. With the material used at the time, only selected lesions could be dilated. There was always the risk of abrupt closure requiring surgical backup. Andreas had the original idea to organize live demonstrations to share his new approach with the largest number of cardiologists, and he established minimal requirement for formal training. The first PTAs in USA were performed the same day by Richard Meiler and Simon Sterzer. Richard chose an easy lesion and Simon a complex one, both with success. The first course was held in August 1978. Andreas had already dilated 25 patients. 7 patients were dilated via live broadcast. The potential of this new method was coming to light. From an angiographic image, it became possible to consider a revolutionary simple treatment which permitted patients to avoid bypass surgery in a number of selected indications. The second course took place in April 1978. More than 200 procedures have been performed in the world. Andreas reminded us what it was a technique in the early stage. We have to be very cautious. Its future may lie within your hands. And you can see Andreas Grünzig, Axening, Marc Turina, the second surgeon, Richard Myler, David Williams, and Jean Marco from Toulouse. In August 1978, Andreas reported the result of his first 50 procedures at the South Atlantic Cardiovascular Society. There, Francis Robitschek, a surgeon, tried to demolish Andreas Grünzig's therapeutic approach. What kind of miracle procedure is this if 1 out of every 5 patients needs to be operated on? If balloons cannot be advanced in 1 out of 3 in coronary arteries? If these balloon jobs close up again in a matter of time due to restenosis? Any medication with such a failure rate will be yanked off the market. Very calmly, Andreas Grünzig answered the questions. Every one of his patients was scheduled for bypass surgery in the first time. Success rates are improving rapidly with refinements in the technique. Better selection of indications should diminish the restenosis rate. The third course was held in January 1980. Now we can still recognize Andreas Grünzig, Maria Schlumpf, Wilhelm Rütishauser, Richard Myler, Simon Sterzer, Jim Margolis, David Williams. On this occasion, Andreas confided to Spencer about his difficulties in Zurich in developing coronary angioplasty. Spencer persuaded Andreas to make contact with Emory University in Atlanta. Andreas wanted to teach the technique and to shepherd it. Above all, he did not want to lose control over its evolution, something which would be impossible to avoid. Willis Hurst, head of the Department of Medicine at Emory, let himself be seduced by the charisma of Andreas Grünzig and made all efforts to get him to Atlanta. Andreas finally obtained all he needed and wanted, whereas he had been treated like a pariah before. Here you can see Andreas with his first wife, Michaela, and daughter, Sonia. Andreas had already delighted 169 patients in Zurich with a primary success rate near 80%, without cerebral balloon in those early times, with no in-hospital mortality and a restenosis rate of 25%. In 3 years, 880 PTCAs were performed in the world, 20% by Andreas, 40% by Richard Myler, Simon Sterzer, and Gerald de Roos, 20% by Martin Keltenbach, David Holmes, Jean-Marco John Simpson, and 22 cases by Jim. And we can see again Andreas, Maria, Mason sons, Charles' daughter, Melvin Jenkins, Richard Myler, Simon Sterzer, Gerald de Roos, Eduardo Souza, Bernard Valex from Marseille, France, Bernie Meyer, the mother of Andreas, Charlotta Grünzig, and Jim Margolis. Now we move into the third stage of Andreas' life in Atlanta.
The stenosis is here. This is the stenosis. And the continuation of the stenosis is the diagonal. So we have the wire ready here. We have the catheter here. I think it's going all right. We have crossed the stenosis, inflated the balloon.
It opened it up?
It opened it up, yes. But we are not finished yet.
Andreas was incredibly skillful. He expected everything to be done very precisely. Things had to run at a high level. He brought out the best in people. In this photo of a live demonstration course in Emory in April 1983, we can recognize Andreas Grunzig, Willis Hurst, Spencer King, Melvin Jenkins, Martin Keltenbach, Richard Myler, Maria Schlumpf, Simon Sterzer, Gerald Ross, Margaret Ann Thornton, Thomas Hitchinger from Frankfurt, Germany, Bernard Valex from Marseille, and myself. This was the time of many changes in Andreas' life, and Margaret Ann was one of them. She was one of his research assistants, and she brought sunshine into his life. As Bernie Meyer described, Andreas needed a coach, and she was the perfect person to teach him on how to adapt to his new life. They decided to get married, enjoyed a cottage on Sea Island, and they bought a new house. Andreas acquired an aircraft in 1984. Life was going well. The American way of life for the refugee from East Germany who had now become the prince of angioplasty. New competitors were emerging. John Simpson's terrible system increased primary success rate, and Jeff Hertzler expanded coronary angioplasty indications. When John first encountered Andreas, he said, "He will either go to jail or win the Nobel Prize." He was fascinated by Andreas. John designed his swan balloon catheter with a steerable guide wire, permitting better access to all stenosis. He first proposed his idea to USCI, but after a 1.5-hour presentation, they said they were not interested. So he founded ACS. Jeff Hertzler performed the first coronary angioplasty at the Mayo Clinic while his boss was traveling. He had never even seen a procedure before. He needed 2 hours to push a balloon through the stenosis and became a hero. The stenosis, the distal test before inflation of the balloon inflated, and the result with a Grunzig balloon. Jeff moved to Kansas City, allowing him to express his pioneering spirit. He performed the world's first angioplasty for acute MI in August 1980. The occlusion, the distal test before inflation, the balloon inflated, and the result. Andreas was concerned about never putting a patient at risk in order to prove that coronary artery dilatation was feasible. However, the objective of Jeff was to share it with the largest number of patients.
So the fact that you have everybody interested because nobody left.
Okay. I continue. Patients were referred to Jeff because surgeons refused to treat them. It was a struggle for Andreas to lose control over what he considered to be his procedure. But in July 1985, Andreas finally recognized what Jeff's intuition to broaden indication for coronary angioplasty had been the right one. Gary Rubin received a grant to work with Andreas, and they quickly became friends. Andreas even invited Gary to live on his estate. Gary was his last confidant. Always patient-focused, Andreas wanted to understand what his patient underwent in the procedure. So in December 1984, Andreas commanded Gary to perform a coronary angiography on himself to demonstrate what it was a safe and simple outpatient procedure. Gary presented the first large series of patient outcomes with multivessel disease dilated at Emory. Gerald Doros suggested what the increased rate of complications was related to technique issues at Emory. There was a stunned silence in the room at such an insulting question. Andreas answered what it was a rigorous evaluation and not a data compilation. Both Richard and Simon admonished Gerald and apologized for him. After Spencer King and John Douglas published a chapter on angioplasty without including Andreas as an author, it was a difficult time for Andreas, and he considered moving to San Francisco to join Richard Meiler, Simon Scherzer, and Gerald Doros. Finally, he decided to stay at Emory. In April 1985, Cesare Gianturco, an Italian radiologist, brought Andreas a Z-shaped spring, what he called a stent. Andreas asked Gary to test this prototype in the animal lab to see how it performed in the coronary artery. We are coming to the end of the month of October 1985. After performing 7 procedures in the day, including one on a vascular surgeon from New York, Andreas left to fly in his private airplane to Sea Island in spite of a hurricane lurking over the Gulf of Mexico. During the night, the vascular surgeon had an abrupt closure and was sent for emergency cabbage. Andreas decided to precipitate his return to Atlanta. Andreas would not come again. Gary waited for him both Sunday evening and Monday morning. On that Monday, the word soon came out what a plane has disappeared near Macon late Sunday afternoon. 1985 was the year when the 4 leading pioneers died. Melvin Jenkins from a myocardial infarction in January, Charles Daughter after a second cabbage in February, Mason Sones from a lung cancer in August, and Andreas in the crash of his private plane, along with his second wife, Margaret Ann, in October. As Andreas said himself, if I had been in the same position, I would have felt the same way. The idea was crazy. The difference between them and me was I had been doing dilatation on the legs for years. I never would have tried doing the coronaries if I hadn't had all that experience. I would not have had the courage. Whatever becomes of the method, I have left one mark on medicine. I have shown what man can work therapeutically within the coronary arteries in the face of an alert, comfortable patient. What about the long term? In April 1978, Andreas performed in Zurich a proximal LED balloon dilatation. It was his eighth patient, his first American. This patient was well for 24 years. He returned for an inferior myocardial infarction at age 74, and he received 2 stents. Incredibly, his LAD was still free from restenosis at 24-year follow-up. Andreas Grünzig wanted to make angioplasty safe and effective. The stent, not seen by him, has now made what possible beyond all expectations. And every time I dilate a coronary artery, I feel like I'm living the dream of Andreas. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. Thank you for coming such a long way to give this talk, and thanks to the AV people for getting us back in business. We have time for any questions or comments? Any memories that come back? I can't tell you how many I have, but I appreciate your bringing back some wonderful times.
One quick question or statement on Dr. Gaspard. His temporary stent was not only useful, it saved many patients. I had 3 patients that saved their lives, and I wish we'd been able to continue with that device. It was a lifesaver in many patients.
You talking about the GR stent?
No, and Dr. Gaspard's temporary stent he developed. He didn't talk about it, but he should have. He's too humble not to bring it up.
Yeah, here's a...
Thank you very much. When we used the palmar shots at the beginning, and when we did not know the double antiplatelet therapy, when we implant a stent, we have thrombosis about in 20 to 30%. So it was necessary to have a device to avoid thrombosis and to avoid to go to bypass. And so we have the idea to invent a temporary stent. It was a catheter balloon, but we implant a mesh at the distal tip, and it was possible to open the mesh or to, at the end of the mesh, we have a guide wire, and when we pull the guide wire, the stent open, and when you push the guide wire, the stent was closed. And it was possible to implant a temporary stent like a balloon when the artery was occluding after dilatation. We opened the temporary stent during 40 minutes, and then we closed the stent, and if the angiographic control was good, it was possible to avoid cabbage. And we perform follow-up the day after, and if it was good, it was not necessary to have cabbage. And we have experience with 29 patients, and in all cases it was possible to open the stent, and it was possible to avoid surgery in all cases during the 24 hours. We have no death during the first month, and we have only 10% of myocardial infarction.
Let me add about Dr. Gaspard. I talked about what to do after life in the cath lab. He has chosen to serve those that are underprivileged. He goes to Vietnam once a month, something like that, for a week or two to do cases here at a hospital. A very, very laudable activity. Congratulations.